Hi, everybody. I'm back with the great and good Richard Plepler, the CEO of HBO. My friend and colleague, at least through the end of the year.
Will always remain a colleague.
Okay, good. And welcome. It's fantastic to have you here. Now, just one quick observation.
Yes, sir.
You're dressed very differently than Harvey Weinstein. Is that somehow indicative of your different styles of creativity?
I saw Harvey on the way out. I am indeed. Look, Harvey's an actual genius. I'm just an executive in search of actual geniuses. So he gets to do that, and I have to wear a tie.
Well,
that's the way it works.
As La Rochefoucauld said, all modesty is false modesty. So
Harvey's a genuine auteur.
Well, let's use that as a jumping off point. I mean, how does that contrast with what you do? I mean, are there not auteurs of networks who have a broader vision rather than an individual film or movie?
We believe and have always believed, certainly through the course and the evolution of our brand over the last 10, 12, 15 years, that we're as good as the people who come to work for us. Our job, really, at the end of the day, is to create an environment where the best writers, the best producers, the best directors, the best talent want to paint. And that is the secret sauce of the HBO culture. You want the David Milches and the David Benioffs and the Larry Davids, the Aaron Sorkins. You want the best creative minds to feel that as they tell their stories, HBO is the place for them. And we try to create an environment and a culture where those people can not only stretch, but where their product is marketed and nurtured and hand-tailored in a way that's quite peerless.
But now HBO is unique in many respects, but you have all different kinds of work, from miniseries to Boardwalk Empire to Girls, things long and short.
Yeah.
You're not just you don't just do one kind of thing, you do many kinds of things.
Yeah.
You make those decisions about whether to say yay or nay going forward?
Yeah, we make them as a team, but I will say this. The essence of what we're trying to do is create a mosaic of creativity that is differentiated from what you see anywhere else. Now, there are plenty of people doing great work out there, and there's a lot of optionality now that actually didn't even exist 5 or 7 years ago. That's fine. We think that given the range of material that we're able to do, 40 documentaries a year, there's no network in television that can do 40 documentaries a year, 4 or 5 original movies, a mini-series or 2, 125 hours of original programming. The metrics for us, for success, is not what the rating is, but how does it enhance the brand? That's very different than the television industry writ large. They have a different set of challenges. They are selling eyeballs to advertisers. That's the business of television. Our business is elevating our brand so that our subscriber says to themselves, we create a kind of passion engagement with our subscriber, and they say to themselves, you know what, I need to be a part of that. For some people, that passion engagement is Girls. For some people, it's Boardwalk Empire. For some people, it's Game of Thrones. For some people, it's our terrific sports programming, Real Sports or Hard Knocks or 24/7. What we're looking to do is have a core gut connection with our 30 million, let me use a political metaphor here in Washington, with our 30 million constituents. We have 30 million constituents, 115 million constituents around the world. We want to have that connection with them. And for different parts of our constituency, different things resonate. And our job is to touch them throughout the month, throughout the year, enough time so that they say over and over, I got to have this.
So if you take the HBO brand, is there an aesthetic, a style that characterizes that? Would I know if I see something on a screen, well, that could only be on HBO, that can't be somewhere else?
You know, another pseudo-political metaphor, Potter Stewart, you know, we know it when we see it. When somebody comes in who is articulating an idea for a concept, and they are breathing it. Okay, David Benioff and Dan Weiss came in and pitched Game of Thrones, which decidedly might have appeared at the time a little off-brand for us. You know, it had a little piece of fantasy in it. And David Benioff came into the office and he said, look, I know you're a political junkie. I know you're an amateur student of history. Let me tell you what this is. This is about power. This is about politics. This is about the archetypes that Shakespeare talked about, hundreds of years ago. That's what this is. And you saw in David Benioff and Dan Weiss's eyes that they knew the arc of this story and how to interpret George R.R. Martin's magnificent books. It just felt organic to us. It's equally true if you take somebody like Larry David who comes in and you just see it's oozing out of him. And we have a shared vision with him. We know that the way he wants to tell stories is going to be differentiated from the mainstream. It feels like it's our DNA, and we lean into it.
But so what, with someone like Larry David, who is an auteur in his own right, how do you restrain people sometimes? There's that famous André Gide quote, art is born of restraint and dies of freedom. You can't give artists, even the most creative types, unrestrained freedom. So how do you keep them in check?
Look, I'll give you a quote. The great music impresario, the late, great Ahmet Ertegun said to me when I was a kid making my way up, he said, you want to know the secret to show business? I said, sure, it's the secret to show business. The secret to show business is that when you bump into a genius, hold on tight. And the truth of the matter is, what we are doing is canvassing for original voices, canvassing for points of view. And so when you have that shared vision on point of view, we have a tremendous array of talent inside our company in Los Angeles and in New York. All of the people who head the different divisions, Mike Lombardo, who runs programming, Sheila Nevins, who runs documentaries, Carrie Thalis, who runs miniseries, Len Amato, who runs our film division. These are the best people in the business. And time again, when artists come to see me, they say, I have not had an experience like this anywhere. And that is why we believe, and that's why there's a line at the door right now, Marty Scorsese wanting to come back, Damon Lindelof, who did Lost for ABC, wants to do a project with us, which we're about to pilot, Ryan Murphy, with great success at Fox, sitting at the door. That's our blessing, the talent that comes to work with us. Now, we then have to sit in the room and make sure that our vision is the same. But once we understand that, our note should be minimal, and their freedom should be as expansive as we can possibly make it. If we do our job right, the pick is the key. And once we make that pick, we are betting on that genius, and we're betting on those talents.
Oh, so
more often than not,
right,
we have a pretty good track record.
Right. You have a tremendous track record, and if the creative part for you is picking the genius, there are some things that haven't been successful, some things that haven't worked out. How do you explain that? Is that choosing the wrong horse? Is that maybe the audience didn't like it?
The zeitgeist, Arthur Miller had a great line. He said, artists do what they do. The rest is up to the zeitgeist. Don't mess with the zeitgeist. And the truth of the matter is that, I was not, obviously, in my current job or even my previous job when Sopranos came in the door, Sex and the City came in the door. Let me tell you something. I was in the room, and I had a seat at the table. I heard the pitches. Anybody that tells you they knew what those shows were or what they would become is absolutely full of shit. Mm-hmm. It is simply not true. I sat in my office then on the 10th floor when the great David Chase came in, and we put the VHSs in the machine, and we watched the first 4 hours of Sopranos, and David looked at me in my office, I see it like it was yesterday, and said, "Do you think anybody watches this?" And I said, "David, look, who knows? Here's all I can tell you. The big guy you picked, that big guy, he's good. The shrink thing, very interesting. The teenagers and the juxtaposition of teenage life, where he's, a crime boss in New Jersey. This is very interesting. Who knows? No one knew. Mm. No one knew. Anybody that tells you that, here's what we knew about Lena Dunham. Let's take Lena because it's a recent example of a zeitgeist phenomenon with girls. Lena does a little movie called Tiny Furniture at South by Southwest. Some of our people see it. They like it. She comes back. We all watch it. We say, this is a very interesting and genuine original voice of the generation. She writes a script. We're intrigued by it. A 25-year-old kid on her own, with some help from Judd Apatow, but not that much, goes off and architects this show, which hits the bullseye of generational zeitgeist. Genius? Yes. Is she special? Yes. Does anybody know how and why that happens? Absolutely not. You make the bet on the people you believe are consonant with what your brand is trying to do. If you trust that, if you trust your brand, and you trust the idea of differentiation, and you believe in the right people, you're going to have more than your fair share of attention, success, and primacy in the culture. If you try to shoehorn the zeitgeist, if you try to do something because it's hitting a particular demo, or you think you need to do something that skews to 18 to 49, or you're in deep trouble, and it will happen over and over again. That's our great blessing. We are not playing to that market. We are playing to our brand and to the elevation of our brand.
Now, you mentioned your previous job, and your path to this job was unorthodox, I think, for your industry. And even in a previous life, so I'm not going to go back. I was remiss in not talking about the life and times of Richard Plepler.
Not that fascinating.
Because there is a gentleman, and I'm looking at him right now, who I think
Secret to my success.
Your career started
true.
with him right over there. And what a coincidence that he happens to be here today. What? Senator Dodd.
Absolutely.
Richard worked for Senator Dodd. I believe that was your first job out of college.
2 days out of school. Absolutely true. Mm-hmm. And I believe was the catalyst for much of my good fortune, which is absolutely true. And you've mentioned politics a couple of times in passing. One of the other things that HBO is known for is, what's the old cliche, ripping the stories from the headlines. Game Change by our Mark Halpern. Yep. You've been very successful in that, and it used to be the idea that politics died Saturday night. How is that? Storytelling. We have the blessing of being able to tell great stories, and we don't make our decisions based upon whether or not we think something is going to get a giant rating. So if you take Game Change, Mark and John came into the office. They hadn't even written the book yet. And they said, we want to do, and I said, a version of Teddy White's 1968 Make It. He said, exactly, that's our goal. And he told us 3-4 anecdotes that they already had in the can, and we embedded a screenwriter. It had a couple of iterations to it. It's a great story. And we don't have to say at the beginning of that process, are 12 million people going to watch this, or 5 million people? All we have to say is this going to be good? Is it going to tell this particular chapter of American history well? And will we be proud of it? Because what Mike Lombardo and I say to each other each and every day is, we are not putting anything on this network that we are not proud of. We're not making any decision about anything that we are not proud of. And that is enormous liberation when you are sitting there deciding whether something is going to work or not. Because if we believe it's good and of high quality, it enhances the brand, and thus it works for us.
And that is a form of creativity, I would say. So you talked about the zeitgeist, and HBO does have an almost unerring ability, at least from the outside, of finding the bullseye of that. We talk all the time. Nobody that I know is a more voracious reader and consumer of information, knowledge, content. I mean, talk a little bit about, I don't even know how you have time to do this, because you're
Chris told me I had to, so.
I'm just curious about how you, when you look, how you survey the terrain, what you consume that keeps you in the know all the time.
Well, I do read a lot, but that's separate from the fact that we're trying to nurture a culture that is transparent, open, free to dissent.
Your own culture.
Exactly. That brooks all different points of view, that listens to each other. Collective wisdom can be an oxymoron. I like to say at our place, it's the Holy Grail. And if you are not listening to your colleagues across generation who have different sensibilities and opinion than you do, you're going to get in real trouble. This idea that there's an idée fixe from the top of the company that gets handed down and stovepiped into the creative process, that is a recipe for disaster. Conversely, if you have a culture which is listening to each other, you're going to get varied points of view. We have a brilliant young executive in his late 20s. I'll just tell you a perfect anecdote, who came into my office early on after we had piloted a show called Eastbound and Down. And it was funny, it was interesting, and I asked him a couple of questions, and he kind of looked at me that I would even be asking these questions. And he said, you know, Richard, you're old, and you think Larry David is the comedic master. I said, I think Larry David is great. He said, trust me, this will resonate as Larry David resonates in around your generation. And the truth of the matter is, he was absolutely right, and Eastbound became a cult phenomenon. And had we not nurtured a culture which said, no, bring in those varying points of view, you're not going to hear that. And you're going to start making decisions as a 54-year-old, New Yorker with a fairly limited bandwidth on how much is going on out there in the culture right now. So what's our job? Our job is to keep the windows open as wide as they can be. You asked about our unerring touch with the zeitgeist. No. Here's what we have. We have a brand that is magnetic to talent who have an unerring eye to the zeitgeist. And they know when they come into our building in Santa Monica or in New York, they're not only going to get a fair hearing, they're going to be treated differently than they're treated in most places. And when that conversation becomes socialized in the creative community so that the Barry Levinsons of the world and the Marty Scorseses of the world and the Tom Hankses of the world and the Steven Spielbergs of the world go around and saying, I just did this at HBO, and Michael Douglas was just in my office. He did Liberace for us, which is premiering next month, and he said, Richard, I've not had an experience like this in a long time. Your marketing people, your public relations people, your talent relations people, your business affairs people. Pacino said the same thing after doing Phil Spector. I've been at this 50 years. That's our job. That becomes the secret to more and more people wanting to work with us.
So one of the themes of today, and we touched on this in pretty much all of the panels, is the relationship between technology and creativity. HBO, in effect, was created out of a new technology.
Yep.
Cable television was created, in fact, out of Time Inc.
Yep. Now,
all of the technology platforms are changing. People watch in different ways. Someone was saying, now with people creating their own miniseries, there's binge watching that people watch on a tablet.
Yep.
There, of course, is HBO Go, which is the gold standard of that. But how is that affecting your decisions, your business, and how do you see the environment going forward?
2 points. First of all, we own our own content. So we are in charge of where our content is disseminated. Every single time in the history of our company, I've been there 20 years, that there has been a technological advance from multiplex, 7 different HBO feeds, 6 different Cinemax feeds, to on demand, to now HBO Go. Mm-hmm. It has been to our great advantage. Why? We are giving our customer, our constituents, more options to watch our stuff, how they want, where they want, when they want. The beauty of HBO Go is that you have all 1,600 hours of our oeuvre going back to the creation of original programming, plus all of our current stuff. You can watch it on whatever device you want to watch it on, watch it when you want to watch it. You have to be a subscriber to do it. But that is a tremendous value added for a subscriber that they can, if they miss Girls, and by the way, you want to talk about binge viewing, we create dual optionality. You can watch Game of Thrones on Sunday night. You can watch it throughout the week on any of the on-demand options that you have, or you can take it with you on your weekend and watch it on your iPad on HBO Go. So we lean into technology because it's always been very good to us, presents more available alternatives to our customers.
So in the digital world, there's a term called responsive design, which is back-end programming, so that anything you look at, watch, or read conforms to the size of that new medium. But your world started out with screens, 4 times the size of this, and obviously adaptation of kids, of younger people watching on the smallest screen of all,
Look,
the smartphone. How does that change what you create?
It doesn't. because those options are secondary to the creative process.
But really, do you want to watch Boardwalk Empire on your smartphone?
No, you want to watch Boardwalk Empire on your 40 or 50-inch flat screen TV. But if you want to catch up on Girls, or you want to catch up on Eastbound, or you heard that we had a documentary called Manhunt about bin Laden and you missed it and you want to watch that on your iPad, that's fine. Again, the optionality. But we're not making creative choices fundamentally based on the size of the screen, although we are architecting different options for young filmmakers, young directors to do things, digital shorts for HBO Go, digital shorts for HBO.com, and who knows, maybe a budding filmmaker is in that group and we see the genesis of something that is going to evolve into a concept or a show.
So you mentioned earlier the fellow that, hey, there's the next Larry David. Are you always on the lookout for the next Martin Scorsese?
Of course.
So how do you know, in terms of your own sensibility, your own aesthetic, your own taste, that, wow, that's the next guy? Because a lot of us, people's taste atrophies and you can't relate to something.
The reason I tell you the Sopranos story or the Sex and the City story of a generation ago is, Bill Goldman famously said, wrote All the President's Men and Butch Cassidy, nobody knows anything. That's partially true. But what you do know is that somebody coming in is the real deal. And so, are you going to bet on Aaron Sorkin? Of course you're going to bet on Aaron Sorkin. Are you going to bet on David Milch? Of course you're going to bet on David Milch. Are you going to bet on a Ryan Murphy or Damon Lindelof? Of course you are. Once those people, and all this becomes infectious, right? So when Lena has an experience like she has of her generation, there are hundreds and hundreds of people out there who we've never heard of who are saying, I want to do what Lena Dunham just did at HBO, and that becomes a catalyst for 10 new people coming in the door. It's the brand that's bringing people in, and thankfully we have the talent inside our house to recognize it, identify it, and nurture it.
And speaking of betting on people, I'm betting on Richard Plepler.
Thank you, Rick. I'm betting on you.
There's almost nobody in our world who makes decisions based on quality and excellence and then have those prove out and be profitable. That's an amazing model for everybody, and I'm so grateful that you were here today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. My pleasure.